It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. The joint statement following the ASEAN Regional Forum could carry somewhat softer language given the participation of North Korea and China, as a source reports hurdles to its adoption. South Korea's prime minister urges swift passage of a supplementary budget bill, saying it is necessary in the face of external uncertainties and for job creation efforts. Hillary Clinton secures the Democratic Party nomination to become the first ever female presidential candidate to represent a major party in the United States. The icing on the cake, the speech by her husband, former President Bill Clinton, who described the former Secretary of State as someone who is real and dedicated to change. The joint statement reflecting the stance of all 27 members who attended the ASEAN Regional Forum is facing hurdles to adoption. That's according to a source who said Wednesday the difficulties are due to conflicting opinions on issues such as the South China Sea dispute. The 23rd ASEAN Regional Forum in Laos wrapped up the day before. Meanwhile, South Korea's foreign ministry said on the same day that it's not appropriate to comment on the statement as the discussions are still in progress, which it also said it means it cannot mention whether the document includes a mention of the deployment of South Korea of the U.S. missile defense system, THAAD. The ministry also said it's hard to predict when the statement will be adopted. Last year's joint statement was issued 4 days after the meeting ended. South Korea's government says at the present time, sanctioning North Korea is the most effective and key method when dealing with the regime's ongoing nuclear and missile threats. The statement was made by Seoul's Unification Ministry on Wednesday. It comes in response to North Korean Unification Minister Ri Yong-ho's comments at a press briefing at the ASEAN Regional Forum on Tuesday in Laos. Ri said that Pyongyang has repeatedly suggested dialogue, but that the South Korean government is not ready for talks. The Unification Ministry reiterated that South Korea's North Korea policy focuses on peaceful unification and that both sanctions and dialogue are appropriate methods. But at the current time, sanctions are a priority as North Korea must first denuclearize. And after that apparent threat from Pyongyang's top diplomat, the United States has urged North Korea to refrain from rhetoric and actions that destabilize Northeast Asia. Katrina Adams, a spokeswoman for the U.S. State Department's East Asia and Pacific Affairs Bureau, told Seoul-based Yonhap News on Tuesday that North Korea should instead focus on taking concrete steps toward fulfilling its international obligations. Meanwhile, South Korea's Deputy National Security Advisor, Cho Tae-yong, has arrived in Washington for talks with U.S. officials on pressuring North Korea over its weapons programs. He said despite the North's desire to frame it otherwise, it is an issue between the entire international community and North Korea, not a matter between the U.S. and the regime. Instead of lofting the usual balloon-stuffed propaganda leaflets out over the border, North Korea has bundled the leaflets up and sent them down the Hwang River this time. Kim Hyun-bin shows us how the regime is trying out new ways to spread its own uniquely flawed messages to South Korea.
North Korea has used the Hwang River to send propaganda leaflets to the south for the first time. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, in announcing the discovery Wednesday, said guard troops near Gimpo, west of Seoul, picked up dozens of plastic bags containing the leaflets from the Hwang River last Friday. The JCS said it believes the leaflets were sent from the Chogangni region in the north.
Previously, North Korea used balloons to send its leaflets, but our military is well prepared for that. So it seems the regime used a different method to confuse our troops and escalate tensions.
Most of the leaflets promote July 27th as the anniversary of the regime's war victory over South Korea, though some of them threatened a missile attack on Seoul. In South Korea, the date is commemorated as Armistice Agreement Day, marking the signing of the Armistice Agreement that ended the hostilities in the Korean War. The South Korean military urged citizens to report any leaflets they may find.
We ask the public to report any leaflet bags they may find to a nearby military base or the police, as they could contain harmful materials.
The leaflets are the latest provocation by the regime after it launched 3 ballistic missiles last week in protest against Seoul and Washington's decision to deploy the THAAD missile defense system to the peninsula. South Korean military says it is on high alert and monitoring for additional propaganda activities near the mouth of the Hwang River and in other vulnerable areas. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
A special ceremony was held to commemorate the 63rd year of the ceasefire between South and North Korea. Prime Minister Hwang KyoAhn delivered a speech stressing that the South Korean government will continue to work closely with the UN and the international community to counter North Korea's provocations. He also vowed to initiate a policy for the betterment of Korean War veterans. The commander of the U.S. Forces Korea, Vincent Brooks, also delivered a speech saying the armistice agreement has provided a safeguard against a tragedy like the Korean War from ever happening again. Among some 3,000 attendees at the event were war veterans and UN Forces delegates. Also, Korea's Prime Minister Hwang KyoAhn explained the urgency of the government's supplementary budget proposal in a policy address today. Kim Young-gil shares with us his speech to the skeptics of injecting extra funds to get the economy moving again.
Prime Minister Hwang KyoAhn asked for the swift approval of the government supplementary budget proposal, saying it is essential to save the economy and create thousands of jobs.
The budget supplement is aimed at cushioning the fallout from the industry-wide restructuring of ailing companies, revitalizing regional economies, and dealing with the external uncertainties resulting from Brexit.
The $9.7 billion proposal includes funds for restructuring efforts in the shipbuilding sector, job creation and stabilizing people's livelihoods. There are also funds allocated for rejuvenating regional economies, bolstering local government budgets and fiscal debt repayment plans. The government and the ruling Saenuri Party are hoping to see the bill passed next month, so the funds can be allocated in September. They estimate it will lift the country's growth rate by up to 0.2 percentage points this year. The opposition parties, which had said they agreed on the need for extra funds, now say they may need more time to thoroughly review the proposal. The main opposition Minju Party of Korea expressed its dissatisfaction with the bill.
The reasons for drawing up the extra budget are still unclear. The Minju Party will thoroughly assess how the funds will be allocated.
The minor opposition People's Party echoed the view, adding that the bill should include funds for a free childcare program for children between ages 3 and 5.
It's been 3 years since the president promised free childcare, but the promise hasn't been fulfilled. Our party will look into how the government plans to deal with this matter.
The party also said it will look deeper into the fragile finances of state-run banks before providing them with support. Although the three parties have tentatively agreed to vote on the bill at a plenary session on August 12th, the road ahead is likely to be far from smooth. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Korean consumers have a much more positive outlook for the country's economy this month, but the nation's top central banker advised caution, noting that recovery momentum remains rather weak. And to tackle the issue, the BOK chief points to the government. For details, let's turn to our Kim Min-ji.
Korea's consumer sentiment has improved slightly, touching the highest point in 3 months. The Bank of Korea says the consumer sentiment index this month came in at 101, up 2 points from June. A reading above 100 means optimism outweighs pessimism. The monthly index reflects consumers' outlook on the economy, their living conditions, and future spending plans. The uptick in July is seen as reflecting easing concerns about the possible fallout from Brexit. The reading came in below 100 for 2 months due to the government's ongoing corporate restructuring drive, which triggered fears of massive layoffs in the country's shipping and shipbuilding industries. Despite this mild improvement in sentiment, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol says recovery in the domestic economy remains feeble, with exports still slow and structural issues such as an aging population and rising household debt very much present. Speaking at a conference held at the National Assembly, the country's top central banker said Korea has enough fiscal strength to cope with the slowing economy and weak job market. His comments are likely a message directed at the National Assembly to push for the swift passage of a supplementary budget bill worth roughly $9.7 billion drawn up to bolster job creation and cushion the impact of corporate restructuring. He added that the country's monetary and fiscal policies need to be coupled with structural reforms to address the problems of low growth and a decline in growth potential. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Turning to the Democratic National Convention, Hillary Clinton has clinched the Democratic Party nomination. She is the first female presidential candidate, rather, to ever represent a major American political party. Every step she takes from here on, the former Secretary of State is making history. Here's Park Ji-won with the highlights from that event.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton secured the Democratic Party nomination during a roll call vote on Tuesday evening, becoming the first female presidential candidate to ever represent a major party in U.S. history. During a roll call vote at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, states read out their delegate allocations for Clinton and her rival, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
The state of New York pledges 108 delegates to Senator Bernie Sanders and applauds him for his call for unity for all Democrats. And New York State pledges 181 delegates for the next president of the United States, Hillary Clinton.
When all was said and done, there were 1,865 votes for Sanders and 2,842 votes for Clinton, well past the required 2,382. The vote ended with a gesture of solidarity from Sanders, who moved to make the nomination unanimous.
And I move that Hillary Clinton be selected as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
The main attraction of the day was the speech by the nominee's husband, former President Bill Clinton, who offered personal anecdotes about how his wife has dedicated her life to making people's lives better, presenting her as a real change maker.
The real one had done more positive change making before she was 30 than many public officials do in a lifetime in office. Cartoons are two-dimensional. They're easy to absorb. Life in the real world is complicated, and real change is hard. And a lot of people even think it's boring. Good for you, because earlier today, you nominated the real one.
After the nomination and the speeches, Hillary Clinton also made a brief appearance via video from New York.
And I can't believe we just put the biggest crack in that glass ceiling yet. I may become the first woman president, but one of you is next. Thank you all. I can't wait to join you in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Clinton is scheduled to give her acceptance speech on Thursday, and then she will turn her attention to campaigning against Republican nominee Donald Trump ahead of Election Day on November 8th. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
We shift our focus to other parts of our world. One of the two men who shot and killed a priest, injured scores of others, and attempted to take hostages at a Catholic church in Normandy yesterday has been identified. Park Jong-hong has the updates on the second deadly attack in 2 weeks in France, a nation already under a state of emergency.
One of the two dead assailants who stormed a French church, killed a priest, and took 4 hostages has been identified as 19-year-old Adel Karamish. He had tried to reach Syria twice last year and was arrested in Germany after trying to use his brother's ID. French prosecutor François Molin said he was later put under electronic surveillance. The attack, which took place Tuesday in a suburb northwest of Paris, happened when the two men interrupted a morning mass. Police say the 84-year-old priest was killed with a knife. Witnesses say the assailants forced him to his knees and slit his throat as they chanted in Arabic. The whole act was reportedly videotaped. Police shot and killed both attackers as they emerged from the building. One of the attackers was found to have been carrying a fake explosives belt made of aluminum foil and 3 knives. President François Hollande, who went to the scene, described the killing of the priest as a, quote, desecration of French democracy, carried out by 2 Islamic State militants.
In the face of this threat that has never been greater in France and Europe, the government is absolutely determined to defeat terrorism.
France was already under high alert after an attack in Nice 2 weeks ago that left 84 people dead and scores wounded, as well as a string of other terror incidents. Following the Nice attack, France extended its state of emergency, giving police extra powers to carry out searches and place people under house arrest. Park Jung-hong, Arirang News.
Coming back to the United States, now a preliminary approval for a $15 billion settlement for Volkswagen's emissions cheating scandal has been granted. U.S. District Court Judge Charles Breyer ruled Tuesday on the deal that would settle consumer lawsuits from American drivers seeking compensation for diesel-powered vehicles rigged to cheat local emissions tests. The term calls for Volkswagen to spend up to $10 billion buying back or repairing about 475,000 affected Volkswagen Audi vehicles with 2-liter diesel engines. Car owners will also be paid at least $5,100 in additional compensation. The judge is expected to make a final decision on the settlement in October. The combined number of international and domestic travelers flying in and out of Korea rose to a record high of nearly 50 million during the first half of this year. According to the Transport Ministry, this is a 14.5% jump from the same period last year. Increase in overseas travelers was slightly higher than that of domestic passengers, climbing over 15% to 35 million. Factors contributing to more Koreans flying abroad include a stronger Korean won and lifting of fuel surcharges for international flights. The rebounding Japanese yen and the earthquakes that hit Japan earlier this year also nudged more Asian travelers to Korea. Experts predict the trend will continue well into the second half of the year, with summer vacation season continuing through the end of August. That concludes our newscast for this hour. As always, thank you for watching.